Later, we'll speak with two young men who turned away from radicalization. But joining me now from Atlanta is Anthony Lemieux. He is a professor at Georgia State University and a researcher and investigator into global terrorism. From Oslo, Norway, Tore Bjorgo is a professor at the Norwegian Police University College and author of Leaving Terrorism Behind. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. Anthony, let me start with you. We just heard in our report there a former U.S. Homeland Security official saying that the main cause of radicalization is unemployment. Do you believe that to be the case?
Empirically, that perspective actually really has not received much support, though what it does suggest, and I think there was another important piece of that comment, is that there is this need for, finding some kind of meaning and belonging. And so to the extent that there are openings there, then there's definitely a problem we need to be concerned with.
Tore, what do you believe are the main causes of young people becoming radicalized?
I think there are different types of people who join these extremist groups for very different reasons. You have a few who are very highly politically and ideologically motivated. They join for political reasons. They are idealists. They are often very resourceful. Then you have some others who join mainly for social reasons. They seek companionship, community, identity, friendship, these kind of things. Then you have others who are mainly adventurers. They seek excitement, action. They are fascinated by weapons and violence, and they want to be heroes. And finally, you have some people who have very deep personal problems. They may have had a horrible upbringing, brought up in violence. They may have seen war. They are traumatized. They may have had a life in crime. And they may seek some kind of redemption and also acknowledgement or kind of acceptance for their skills, their criminal skills, and they can play a role in these groups as well. So they join for very different reasons, and also they leave for very different reasons. They get disillusioned for quite different reasons.
Anthony, to what extent does United States military action or military action by the United States and its allies push push youth into radical camps? I mean, if we look at, and we see this on television all the time and on the internet, pictures of bombs falling on people, killing, thousands of civilians, women, children, destroying entire cities, destroying homes, etc. Young people see this and say, we've got to act because, in many instances, they say, it's our religion that's being attacked here.
Well, and that's part of the narrative that really is being carefully crafted. It's taking those kinds of images, taking these images of conflict and harm that is purportedly done to a group that people are supposed to identify with, and then it's positioned as that kind of grave existential threat that requires some kind of action, that requires you to do something. And the way that the propaganda that we study in my lab, the way that it spins it is to really kind of cast it in a very specific light. It portrays very clearly the heroes, the villains, and suggests the courses of action that in the case of ISIL actually have a much broader historical importance, something that really is world-changing, earth-shattering as they're really trying to craft that. And that really can coalesce to create a very compelling narrative for people.
What do you think, Tore? Does military action by the United States, by European countries, does that have anything to do with it?
It's clearly one of the radicalizing factors for some people. There are young people who get angry, especially seeing that their own country is involved in the military attacks on what they consider to be the Muslim community, and this is radicalizing some people. But it's also clearly something used in the propaganda, as Anthony mentioned. It's part of the message. But I think we cannot understand why people join these groups without understanding that there is a political context which at least is influencing quite a lot of people.
And Anthony, when we look now at the programs that are being used to offer young people an alternative, another way out of this, I mean, what does the training involve here? Is it psychological? Is it religious training? Is it counseling? Combination of all three or more?
That's an empirical question as well. I mean, and it's one that really I think we need to catch up relatively quickly on and think not only about, what kinds of elements need to be part of a program, but also then how to measure and evaluate the efficacy of that. And I was just at a meeting last week in Washington, this very topic came up, thinking about that because, in order to really understand what we need to build into a program to try to fix a problem. I think we have a ways to go in fundamentally understanding the problem in the first place. So there's two sides to that. It's really kind of figuring out what those catalysts are. As Tori mentioned, I think this is critically important. There are many different kinds of motivations. So having something that can work for different sorts of people, and then having the metrics, the evaluation, and the framework so that if you do something that works, that is effective, how can you roll it out at a broader scale? How can you make it something that goes beyond just being a one-off sort of program? And that is a huge challenge.
Right, let's ask Tori, who created Norway's program called Exit. Tori, how did that work?
Well, this was directed towards people involved in racist and right-wing and neo-Nazi movements in the late 1990s. And we had three goals. The first was to assist people who wanted to leave the Nazi scene. The second was to mobilize parents and use them to get their children out. And the third goal was to provide knowledge to the different professions who are working with these young people, the police, teachers, social workers, and so on. And we were very successful with the latter two, with working with parents and with the professions. In Norway, we were not so successful with providing direct assistance.
Right, and Tori, we also have this phenomenon of the internet right now and social media. We talked with the mothers of two ISIL youngsters who went across to the Middle East. They were killed in the Middle East. Spoke with one of those mothers, and she addressed this particular issue. Let's watch her.
They're being drawn in, groomed by these people over the internet. They have resources 24/7 that can sit there, talk to them, groom them, make them feel special, important, convincing them that everything they're seeing on the media is a lie. That was something I heard from my son quite a bit, that the media told so many lies. And they don't know what to believe. And having these people surround them and saying this is a place of truth, this is a place of justice where we all live together, everybody's treated the same, everybody's looked after and provided for, what else can they believe?
How can you counter that? How do you counter the influence, the massive influence that the internet has over young people?
This is really one of the main channels for getting in, for these movements to get in contact with young people and persuade them and mobilize them and recruit them. So this is clearly and it's a dilemma what to do about it, because we cannot just not shut down the internet. There have been attempts to try to shut down special fora, and it works to some extent, but it's not a good solution. But I would like to comment on the other issue brought up about those young people with particular psychological problems. That is something we've seen a lot in Scandinavia, both in the right-wing extremist scene and also in the militant jihadi scene, that we find people there who have ADHD or Tourette or Asperger or other kind of psychological problems, who sort of do not fit well into the ordinary use scenes and feel out of place, and then they realize that these extremist groups are much more accepting, they're much more tolerant than many other groups they have tried to get into. So there are quite a lot of these young people who have these kind of various syndromes and psychological problems who end up in these groups. So that is a clear pattern we see here.
Right, Anthony, one quick question, and that is, these de-radicalization programs, they do have their critics. They say, look, you're wasting your time, this is not going to work, that people, young people who re-enter society after being in these radical groups remain dangerous. Is there any evidence to bear that out?
I think that can go, there's certainly studies of recidivism, but the truth of the matter is some of the opinions may remain fairly radical. What we're really interested in as well is kind of changing the behavior and getting that sort of disengagement where, people may channel whatever that kind of core motivation might be into something that's more productive or more effective that allows them to re-engage. Unfortunately for many people, that comes a little bit too little too late. And once they're truly engaged, it's very difficult to get out, both from the perspective of leaving a group like ISIS, or with the ability to actually, go home, because they, there may be trouble waiting for them there as well. So it really is a very difficult position, and I think one of the things we need to be cognizant of as we're talking about, returning fighters or disengagement or de-radicalization programs, however you want to think about it, is that we have to have you know, that coordinated to some degree with the kind of legal structures or things that would allow that to happen. Otherwise, it really puts, you know, people in an untenable position who might otherwise really be motivated to get out.
We're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Anthony Lemieux from Atlanta, Tore Bjorgo joining us from Norway. Thanks to both of you.